Good morning. Today's webinar topic is Fight the Spread of COVID-19 and Get Back to a Clean Work Environment. My name is Pamela, and I will be the web organizer for today. We welcome GCP members to today's webinar. We also welcome a few non-members. So for more information about joining GCP, please log on to www.gcpartnership.com. Before we get started, I would like to take a moment to go over a few housekeeping items. We want to make sure today's presentation is extremely valuable for you. So we ask that you submit all questions by clicking on the question button in the control panel and typing in your question. Our speakers today are Zach Wondrisko and Dean Stevens. Zach started the Donwell Company in 2009 as a data network specialist. Since then, he is focused on the reliability of critical infrastructure in data centers and, amid the constantly adapting landscape of today's market, has expanded his view to overall business continuity. Dean is a market development executive with Donwell Company with expertise in critical infrastructure and channel sales management. A Youngstown, Ohio native and a University of Akron graduate, Dean currently lives in Northwest Akron with his wife, Emily, and daughter, Ellie. I'd like to now turn the presentation over to Zach and Dean.
Pamela, thank you so much, and good morning, everyone. This is Zach Wondrisko here. I want to start by thanking you all for joining today. I want to thank GCP for having us. We embrace the opportunity to talk about the small part that we are trying to do in helping all of our peers in the greater Cleveland community get back to work and get back to work safely, which is the most important thing that we can be focused on. So a little fun fact about me that's not in my bio. I am fortunate enough to have a 95-year-old grandfather, if you can believe that, which I think we can all agree he has witnessed a good portion of modern American history at this point, and has probably seen it all. So I'd like to talk to him about current events, and this is certainly one, the pandemic and COVID, that is one that I was interested to speak with him about. And, I just asked him, what do you think about all this? And of course, after reminding me that since he survived World War II and 75 years of marriage, nothing was going to take him down, he said to me something that was, I think is just so fitting. And he said, I've seen better times and I've seen worse times, but I've never seen anything quite like this. And I think that's why we're all here today. I think that's why, Dean and I have gone out and done what we've done and tried to help get some awareness around this uncharted territory and uncertainty that we're all feeling and we're all seeing and we're all living in today. So a little bit about how we kind of got there and why our company has taken on this initiative in exploring these methods. So Donwell was founded in 1965 as an HVAC company, and almost immediately we fell into this niche of working with precise cooling applications. So if you think about data centers, medical facilities, laboratories, environments that really need to have a very tight control over not over the temperature of a space, but how it's cooled, the humidity levels, and constantly being cold, so 24/7, hence the critical infrastructure world that we live in. That's really what we focused on. So whenever it started to become apparent that the spread of the virus was at least in part airborne, we really took a step back and we said, okay, this is what we do. Let's step up. Let's look into ways that we can help our friends and family and peers here in Cleveland get back to work, apply some technologies to their systems to make sure that at least that part of the spread is contained to the best of our ability. So two things I want to make abundantly clear right out of the gate. Number one, Dean and I are not from the medical world. If they let us tag team a shot at a medical degree, we probably would still fall short. So Dean, sorry for throwing you under the bus, but we both know that's true. Just want to set expectations that we're not coming at this from a standpoint of claiming that we know how COVID exactly affects the body and all that stuff. We're merely trying to open your eyes to the technologies that we know have now been proven to stem this airborne delivery system of the virus to folks. So number two, we fully recognize there's no silver bullet. Neither the technologies that we chose to talk about today are gonna solve the problem for you. It's not a one and done deal. We're all still trying to figure out more. about exactly how this spreads and how we can beat it. So on top of everything else that we're saying, please follow CDC guidelines, wash your hands, wear a mask, keep your distance. Today, we just want to talk about some technologies that we find are proven to complement those activities. So with that, we explored a few different ideologies. We've talked to a lot of different folks in the market, and we've looked at humidification levels. That's something we've always worked with since the 60s, and how that affects the spread of the virus. We talked about VRF systems over ducted HVAC, and we've even worked with some organizations that have come with us with some ideas that are a little bit more creative, and talk to them about how that might affect their energy consumption. There's financial obligations, obviously, stress on the environment, everything like that, and how it can affect that. So two technologies we're going to talk about today, and we chose these because A, they have proven effectiveness. B, they are both able to be retrofitted into most current buildings. So it doesn't require a new build or building a new campus or a new office. They can be retrofitted into most spaces that you exist in today. And number three, they both have long-term advantages in a post-COVID world, hoping that we get there someday. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dean to talk about the first one.
Thanks, Zach. Thanks, GCP. Thank you, everybody who's signed on today to learn about these two technologies. And we just appreciate your time today. So thanks again. And Zach, I'm not a doctor. I did not take offense to that. That is no problem. So the first type of technology that we're going to talk about is UV light, ultraviolet light. And I believe there's some HVAC folks on the call today that are probably very familiar with this type of technology. It's been around for a very long time in the HVAC space. But let's talk about a little bit of 101 about what ultraviolet light is and what it isn't, right? So what it is part of the electromagnetic spectrum. There are multiple bands within ultraviolet as well too. So you may have heard about UVA. That's used for like black lights and curing of inks and adhesives and coatings. And then UVB, that's typically used in tanning situations. That's how we get all nice and tan in the summertime. UVC is a short wave between 190 and 280 nanometers of a band of light, and that causes significant damage to DNA in cells, right? So that's not used for human consumption. But that is also the technology that can kill virus, bacteria, mold, things of that nature, and that's why it's technology that can be used within the HVAC system, and it can be used to be able to kill that bacteria and prevent it from spreading. So again, the sun emits three types of UV light. We mentioned UVA, that's the majority of sunlight. UVB, that's the stuff that causes sunburn, gets you tan, but also can potentially cause skin cancer. And then UVC, which is the most harmful, but is typically and largely blocked by the ozone layer already. So we cannot handle UVC light exposure directly to our skin. This definitely isn't something that we want folks to bathe in UVC light to be able to prevent spread of the coronavirus. Mr. President, thank you very much. So why is UVC effective? Not to get too scientific here, but I'm going to bring us back to probably third or fourth grade science class when it comes to DNA and what the UVC light actually does at its core. So those outer bands of the DNA, those are called the phosphate backbone. And what the UVC light does is actually goes in and it creates the horizontal bars there. Those connect the phosphate backbone. It'll actually zip through those and burn those through and render the DNA form totally useless. So it essentially destroys it directly at the DNA level. And that destroys any sort of cell that has a DNA. So again, that's viruses, that's bacteria, that's mold. And it also, in part, obviously it destroys the DNA cell, but it also makes it so that it can't reproduce. And that's the most important thing. So why do we use it? Obviously, we mentioned about what it does to the DNA and the RNA of the pathogen and the virus. It affects things that we can't see with the naked eye. That's the key. It also doesn't leave any residual chemical or an odor. Like when you're talking about bleach or Lysol, things like that, it doesn't technically have to be applied or wiped away. It's a light. You shine the light on the surface, and it kills the virus and it kills the bacteria. Also, too, a benefit is, if you treat a room with UV light or you treat an HVAC system with UV light, it's immediately ready for use afterwards. You don't have to wait for a period of decontamination or anything. So how do we use the UVC light? Well, there's a couple ways that we use UV light, knowing full well that we can't apply this directly to our bodies and have that burn the virus off of our hands. We put them in places where humans typically aren't. Number one, up in the ceiling area. So these units that you're looking at here on your screen now are wall mounted, and they are up in the very top of a room. Typically, these are used inside of, surgical rooms or hospitals or things of that nature. So when the air naturally circulates throughout the room, it's then being, the airborne particles, the airborne viruses are being effectively killed at that top level when they're being circulated throughout the room. Also, direct UVC. So this is probably the most common within the hospital setting. These are fixtures that are mounted directly into rooms so that when a patient leaves or a doctor leaves a surgical room and everybody's clear of it, you turn the UV lights on. The UV lights then kill all the bacteria, again, when the room is unoccupied. Direct UVC. So this is a small device that has a handle on it that can be passed over a mouse, a keyboard. This is great for maybe a school or a hospital or something like that, where, you have students that leave the room, then you have the UV lights that come in and actually kill the bacteria, on the keyboards and in the mice, places that are really hard to see, really hard to reach with traditional disinfectant. And how do we measure that? We're going to get into that here in a little bit, I believe on the next slide, but we use dosimeter cards. And what we do is we can actually see if that UV light is powerful enough to kill the bacteria. So you essentially place the card down, and I'll show you that here in a little bit. You cycle the UV light over the card then turns a different color, and then you could see that this surface was effectively cleaned. Also, by the use of radiometers, and these measure the intensity of the UVC fixtures. So how do we know if it's working or not, right? Well, you either check A, you check the actual surface by the use of the cards, or B, you utilize the radiometer to make sure that the UV light is emitting the correct amount of light in order to kill any bacteria. These are the cards that I was mentioning, the UVC dosimeter cards. So this will tell you if the amount of UV light that was put on the surface was enough in order to be able to kill the bacteria. So these are quick, these are easy. They're a couple bucks a piece. They're not crazy. They come in packs of 50. And this is a good way for you to see if your surface is clean or not. Obviously, we can't see virus and bacteria with the naked eye, so this is a good way to be able to do that. Now, what really brings us here today, I think, is the ability to be able to use these technologies into HVAC systems. And when this virus first came out, I remember reading countless articles about how people were concerned that the virus is spread throughout HVAC systems. And frankly, that's why schools were shut down, for the most part. That's why offices were shut down. One of the reasons, obviously. The air is constantly being recirculated. And if you have folks that are asymptomatic, and that's a big deal with the coronavirus, they could be working and have really no symptoms, yet they could be passing the virus. And how do they do that? Well, they sneeze into an air return vent. Next thing you know, it's being spread throughout the office. So there's two main ways that we can utilize UVC light in order to kill that bacteria, in order to kill that virus and prevent it from spreading. And we're going to talk about both of those ways right now. One of them is being on coil, one of them being in duct. Okay. First of all, let's talk about the coils and drip pans. These are some of the lovely things that we see in the field when it comes to coils and drip pans and mold and units that aren't technically being taken care of like they should be. And these are, surprisingly, these are in critical cooling environments, right? These are in environments where if that AC unit goes down, if that HVAC unit goes down, there's a lot of repercussions to that. These are hospitals, these are things like that. So, I want to show this slide. The reason why I put this in here is to show you what actually grows and what actually can be spread inside of these systems. Now, on coil. So if you have an AC unit, right, if you have central air, you have an indoor coil. That's a prime location for the development of mold and bacteria, right? Why? Well, it's because the coil is used to condense moisture from the air to dehumidify your home and in your office during AC cycles. So as air passes over the coil, dirt, dander, and other debris stick to the wet surface. That combination then creates a breeding ground essentially for mold and bacteria. Then that gets spread and bad things happen. So what do? We apply the UV lights to the coil. We place them strategically within the air handler on the coil, and it essentially it kills everything that has a living DNA cell or an RNA cell to it, and it renders all of that totally sanitized. That's the key. So it prevents you from having to wait every 3 months, 6 months to have a PM done on your HVAC system, because these lamps are constantly going and they're constantly cleaning and they're constantly making sure that nothing's growing on those coils. Now there's not only the coils, but the drain pans as well too. These are breeding grounds. There's also a benefit to this as well too. So is it going to create, a more efficient system? Well, yes, absolutely it is. Because what that does is essentially is constantly cleaning those units, and then it's eliminating the constantly cleaning programs that you have to put in, and it lets those units run more efficiently. The other way that we can do this is in duct, and what you're looking at is the duct, and you're looking at the filters. So the lamps are installed in the airstream itself. So as the air passes by the lamps, then the air itself gets disinfected. So not only are you disinfecting the surface that the air passes through on the coil side, but you can disinfect the air through the cold air return in order for you to be able to have nice treated air run through your HVAC system. So these are two main ways that we go through applying UV light into the HVAC system to be able to make sure that we have clean air to be recycled throughout the building. I know we kind of went through that a little bit quickly, but there's a lot more to be said about it. And at the very end of the presentation, we're going to have some time for some questions, and we'll be able to dig into it a little bit more. But without further ado, I would like to turn it back over to Zach, who's going to talk to us about bipolar ionization. So we have two methodologies here. Inside the HVAC system, to clean the HVAC system, to clean the coils, clean the air that's passing through, right, your AC system. But also, too, what do we do about the space where people are? What do we do about the space where folks are occupying that? And obviously, what we talked about is we can't apply UV light to that because UV light's harmful to people. So what can we do? Zach's going to talk about what we can do about the occupied spaces. Go ahead, Zach.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dean. And thank you for informing us on the UV technology. As Dean said, UV is obviously one of the most tried and trusted methods of sanitization. And so getting it into the HVAC system is very effective. Where it isn't effective is actually in the space. So the main difference with bipolar ionization that we're going to discuss is that bipolar ionization, instead of being placed where the air filters through it, bipolar ionization actually is propelled out into the space, into the room itself. So we'll get into that in a couple slides here so you guys can get a visual of how that works. But let's take a step back and talk about bipolar ionization and exactly what it is. So first and foremost, it is not a new technology. Bipolar ionization is actually a naturally occurring phenomenon that we imagine has been happening since the beginning of time. It is rumored to have been first discussed by Albert Einstein in the early 1900s. Full discretion, there is some debate about whether that is accurate or not, but we do have it on record from the early 1900s. So whether Al was involved or not, I can't speak to. Most people say he was, but don't hold me to that. So, but long story short, bipolar ionization. If you see here on our slide, I put up a waterfall. I was actually watching. My wife and I were watching our 30th Netflix documentary of the quarantine. I'm sure you guys all can relate to that. And we get into this episode 1, and there's 2 hosts, and they go to Iceland to go explore renewable energy sources. So they're in Iceland. They go through a couple different ways of handling that with solar and thermal, and they finally decide to cover the topic of hydroelectricity. So they visit Gullfoss Falls, which is the picture here in Iceland. It's one of Iceland's 10,000 waterfalls, and they do the whole segment on hydroelectric power and the benefits and how it helps the environment and everything. And then as they're actually panning away from it, and the guys are walking, away from the camera, the narrator comes on, and I'm going to read this because I want to make sure I don't misquote it. But he says, and one more thing, water in motion produces negative ions, which are known to relieve stress, reduce tension, fight depression, and increase energy. In short, all these negative ions are creating some very positive vibes. And then he goes into talk about how they leave the falls feeling fantastic because of these negative ions. That is essentially what bipolar ionization is. So you might all have, a lot of you have probably experienced this actually. If you've ever stood by a crashing shore, or been hiking up in the mountains, there's a crispness to the air that almost has a smell to it. You notice it when it's present. If you know it's there, you recognize it, but it's not something that you would think about or see or hear or feel, right, necessarily. But if you actually go back through your memory, you can probably understand what that feeling is, and that is the effect of bipolar ionization. So now the technology side of this is encapsulating it into a device that we can recreate it in systems that we can place into buildings. So that also actually is not a new technology. As my good friend Zac Efron said, there's a lot of benefits before COVID: reducing tension, fighting depression, increasing energy, relieving stress. So actually a Swiss company, I believe, was the first to take that and build a tube that allows oxygen molecules to be ionized. So whenever they pass into the airspace, all those benefits go out into the space. That dates back to the 1960s. So also not new technology. It's just coming to the forefront today because we have found it also helps with the virus. So talking about this slide here, if you look on the far right, that is ion counts, right? So you see you have fresh mountain air, tons of ions in the air. That's where you're getting that crispness, that freshness naturally occurring. And if you go all the way to the left down there, that's where we get to inside of buildings. Now, unfortunately, especially here in Cleveland, Ohio, we spend about 90% of our time inside. So we're not taking advantage of this sensation. So what we did, and especially coming up on the ever beautiful Ohio winter, we're going to find ourselves indoor more and more. So with that in mind, and with COVID approaching, we really thought about how we can deliver this to our market to make sure that as we all have to get back inside, we are making sure that the space itself is ionized, is purified. Dean, if you could go to the next slide. Thank you very much. So let's jump into exactly why we're all here today. How does this, like I said, a lot of other benefits. We'll retouch on those later, but this is why we're here. So how does it help with coronavirus? So when these ionized molecules come into the space, they actually, because they have a negative or a positive charge, they seek out hydrogen molecules. So we've all seen this image. We've all seen this coronavirus. I think my 2-year-old could draw it because she's seen it so much on TV if I asked her to draw one. But you have your lipid layer that protects the DNA of the virus itself, and then you have your proteins, and that's what helps actually infect the human body. So whenever these ions pass through the space, they naturally seek out these viruses. They seek out the hydrogen molecules in the lipid layer and the proteins. And then once they are attached, they have another reaction that creates the need for them to go out and sort out another ion. So basically what it does is it attaches itself to the virus, and then it pulls it apart, and it neutralizes the virus. So the DNA actually remains intact. That's part of what makes this a safe technology for humans, because it does not affect the virus's DNA. It does not affect our DNA. I know this sounds so simple for this virus that we have all changed our lives dramatically for, but if you think about it, the virus itself is actually a very fragile it's a very fragile molecule. I mean, we all know this. We can kill it by washing our hands for 20 seconds with, you know, Bath and Body hand soap, or using at least 60% alcohol hand sanitizer. It's not a virus that needs a whole lot to break it down. So the molecules and the ions come into the air, and they do just that. Next slide, please. All right, so put our money where our mouth is. We knew for a while that viruses obviously could be broken down in this sense. So we partner with Atmos-Air. Atmos-Air is one of the leading developers of bipolar ionization tubes. So Atmos-Air went to Microchem Laboratories. Microchem is known for doing FDA and EPA approval for a ton of household names, Lysol being one of them, which I'll use as an example since they're obviously shooting for the same thing we are in disinfecting and dealing with this virus. And so as you can see here, in the lab in a controlled environment, and I will say, and I can provide, if anyone wants to see the full test report, I'd be more than happy to send it to you. My contact information will be on the last slide. I'm sure you can also get it through the GCP team. But reach out to me, I'll send you the full test report. So what we did was, since this is a very serious topic, and this is something that we wanted to make sure that we were actually executing on, we put the virus in the testing facility in an environment that would be a real environment. A lot of times whenever people run these tests, they'll do it with an extreme amount that would never actually be used in a real situation. We did it in a sense that we wanted to see exactly how it would look in real life. So if you look at this, the average, the bottom in the table, the bottom row there is average percent reduction. That was after 30 minutes, just 30 minutes after turning on the Atmos-Air system. 99.92% of the virus molecules in the air were neutralized. You go to an hour, you go to an hour and a half, and honestly, you can't do a whole lot better than 99.2%, but it does increase. But after 30 minutes, we already got to 99.2% on neutralizing the virus in the space. Next slide, please. Just to give you a quick visual on this, this is what the actual device looks like. So those tubes are actually what creates the ionization of the oxygen molecules as they pass over them. Next slide. And what we like to do is we install these in the supply side of ductwork. That is really important because it is in most cases very easy to achieve in a current building situation. So this isn't something that you have to rip out walls or anything like that. If you have access to supply side ductwork, you can install one of these, supply power. We can even run the power back to the system. So when the unit will only turn on when the HVAC is on, making it useful, so that you can save energy there. And frankly, speaking of energy, I don't know the exact wattage of the system we're looking at here, but it's a very low power consumption, so it's incredibly energy efficient in that sense. Moving on, Dean. So this is where you get a visual of exactly how this works, why we place it where we do. And I know I imagine with GCP reaching out to such a large audience that I know that there's a lot of different folks on the call from different backgrounds. So I just want to make sure we kind of touch on anything for anyone that's in the HVAC field, anyone that's going to be a user, anyone that this might be completely new to and is just trying to learn something new. But if you see here, so I'm trying to describe this without having a pointer. If you see just above the dapper gentleman's head there, which I assume he's at a wedding because no one dresses like that for work anymore. Now it's sweatpants and Cleveland Browns t-shirts. But if you look above that gentleman's head, there is the Atmos-Air system there. So whenever air blows through the face or through the HVAC system, you see the fan behind it and then the coil. So we want that fan. The reason we put it in the HVAC system is actually to perpetuate the molecules through the space. We want to just use the airflow as a travel device, as a travel mechanism to get into the space. So that's why we install it on the supply side. So this is where BPI is different from UV in the sense that we are now blowing these ions into the space. So if this gentleman has COVID and he's in the space and he's coughing, instead of waiting for his virus to get sucked back up through the return air plenum and then come through the whole system and then go through the coil where it'll be sanitized or into the return ductwork, it is actually the ions are going to go into the space and actually attack the virus where it is being driven. So that is the main differentiator between this and the UV technology. Is this is what we consider a proactive approach to going out and attacking the coronavirus as we know it. All right, like I said, this is one of the reasons we wanted to touch on these two technologies, is because they have benefits that will continue to add value in the future. So if the day comes where there is, coronavirus is controlled, a vaccine, whatever it might be, like I said, this technology has existed since the 60s, and because it has benefits to just work environments in general. So first of all, everyday bacteria and viruses. We already talked about that. It'll have the same effect on those as it does COVID. Believe it or not, the common cold and flu still does exist out there. I think we've all become so focused on the coronavirus that we forget about that. But so in the future, it will have the same effect on that it does anything else. VOCs and particulate matter. So the ions actually, so these very small microscopic molecules, the ions will actually don't attach themselves to the molecules. It'll make them heavier and larger, so they will either A, drop to the ground and be swept up by the cleaning crew that night, or they'll become big enough that they can actually get captured in the filter on the return side of the HVAC system. So a lot of times the particulate matter is too small to actually do that. So this does actually make your filters more effective, making your HVAC system more effective. Mold, about the same effect as UV on mold. It breaks down the outer layer so that the mold can't perpetuate growth. We've actually had folks install this for simply mold reduction purposes, and it has proven to be effective drastically in that sense. And then bioeffluents. So one of the main reasons this has been installed in the past is that a lot of people think that carbon dioxide is one of the main reasons that people get groggy if they're in an environment that doesn't have fresh air and stuff like that. But it's actually ammonia is the #1 reason. And humans generate that naturally. So this actually helps pull that out of the air as well and increases productivity. And lastly, smoke. There's actually a really cool video online that shows this, but it actually eliminates smoke in the air. We installed this at a local casino, and well, I shouldn't say it just over the border, but a casino. And after speaking with the casino's marketing department, they actually said that the #1 review that they get on their customer reviews is how pleased they are that it doesn't smell like smoke in the casino anymore. And that was after their installation of bipolar ionization devices. Yeah, so once I started working with BPI, the #1 overwhelming aha moment I got was, anymore we're all about bottled water. We're all about purified water. We're all about filtering our water. We're all about non-GMO food and organic food to make sure that harmful particles aren't getting into our body. And it blows my mind that whenever we take in 11,000 liters of air per day, we're not filtering that. We're working in environments where there's VOCs. We're working in environments, where there's particulate matter and viruses and bacteria. So, kind of off the COVID path, there are so many benefits to BPI moving into the future. Next slide. Lastly, if the microchem studies aren't enough, one of the reasons we chose Atmosair as the partner we really wanted to ride into this with was because they actually started as a air quality testing company. So they were the company that wanted to make sure that everyone that created products like this had to prove that they were doing it correctly. And so we still have that element of it. So, if the reports aren't telling you, and what I've said so far aren't telling you that you need to see something more tangible, then we do have devices that that's actually on the wall there. You can see it's a plastic bezel, it's a magnetic bezel, and you can pull these little iPad type devices off. You can take them room to room, and it'll tell you your air quality in different spaces. So we've obviously done a lot of testing. Most people install it, get it up and running so they can see what their current is, and then whenever they turn on Atmosair, they see the improvement. So that's available as well. And it's all web-based, so you can actually see it in real time over an app or on your phone or whatever. So I think we just have a couple applications here. I know a lot of people seem to be more comfortable, or not more comfortable, a lot of people seem to be more familiar with UV than BPI. So just to give you a feel, this is a widely used technology. A lot of workplaces here. And we just did an installation in the Empire State Building. Just keep scrolling through. So schools is probably our #1 application right now. All these schools that are trying to get back, make sure their students are healthy. We're doing a lot of work there. Sports facilities, actually the Cavs are using BPI in their facility. Staples Center was an interesting one because it sits in downtown LA, which obviously has a lot of pollution. So they needed to clean the air. They were having issues with the air, so they reduced their VOCs in the stadium or in the arena by 90% after installing bipolar ionization to help with the consumer experience. Airports, obviously a huge use case for this. You have people traveling all over the world in and out, bringing viruses, bacteria, all that stuff all around. And B, you have fumes coming in from the planes landing so close to the airport. So that is a huge use case for bipolar ionization as well. And then obviously we're all working to try to get travel back up and running. And do it safely. So a lot of hospitality and hotels and whatnot have been using this as well. And we discussed the smoke at the casino, and that's probably the #1 use case for it in these environments.
All right,
So,
Zach,
Dean?
great job. Yeah, great job. Just in closing, we want to reiterate that these aren't magic bullets that can be deployed, and next thing you know, we can all get back to work and hug and high five again. This is to be used in conjunction to help us get back to the way of life that we became accustomed to. Be able to let our kids come back to school, be able to go fly on a plane or go to a casino, or frankly just work in an office environment again. This goes in conjunction with washing our hands, with wearing masks, with maintaining a 6-foot distance until there's a more solidified medical approach to getting rid of this virus. But until that day, I think we're all facing this new normal. So these types of technologies, the 2 types of technologies that we talked about, these are real, tangible, proven ways that you can reoccupy the spaces that we're all used to being in. So we just wanted to reiterate that. And, with the 2 technologies as well, these are things that when they become applied today in post-COVID-19 world, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, you can still see benefits. With the ultraviolet light cleansing of the coils of the AC unit, your HVAC systems are going to run more efficiently. They're going to be able to be monitored so that you don't have to worry about seeing if the lights are working or not, because they can be integrated into a BMS system. Same thing with Atmosair and the bipolar ionization. We're going to be breathing filtered air, like Zach said, that we drink filtered water and we eat food that's gone through a process to make sure that there's nothing harmful put in them. So again, what we do, who Donwill is, well, there's a couple of notes. Donwill, Zach mentioned, we've been in business since the 1960s. We started out as a critical HVAC supplier, right? A critical system supplier. We also are heavily involved in the IT space and critical power and IT infrastructure as well. So, this is our new logo. If you go to our Donwill company, www.donwill.com, or our LinkedIn page, it might look a little bit different because we are in the process of rebranding. We were traditionally a critical HVAC and power company, and now we're getting into the other critical parts and probably the most important critical parts of our lives and in our businesses, and that's our people. And that's why we have become somewhat experts on these two technologies. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us.
Yeah, I actually have some questions here, Dean and Zach, if you have a second.
We definitely do. And yeah, I was just going to open it up there. So go ahead.
Oh, great. Okay. The question is, I've received quotes for PHI units for our HVAC. How is this different? And what are maintenance concerns for atmosphere?
Zach, do you want to grab that one, or do we want to answer that one offline? Because there's probably a lot that we could talk about there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so atmosphere, there is a little bit of a different approach. So most of the manufacturers that are in the bipolar ionization use glass tubing. Glass tubing, it traditionally lasts about a year. I'm seeing that a lot of folks are saying that now goes to 2 years. Atmos Air uses we call it DBD tubes. So we used to use glass because they're fragile. There was a lot of, especially you put them in an HVAC unit, there's a lot of movement in there. We'd see a lot of stuff. We'd see some breaks sometimes. We'd see, and they're very fragile. So we went to something that was a little bit more sturdy. So you eliminate the chance that there's going to be something to break, and B, they have a 2-year life. And so basically, whenever you install the unit, we encourage you to replace them after the first year, just because that's when you're going to be taking in most of the VOCs, particulate matter, mold, smoke, whatever it is. So they're going to get really run down in that first year, and then after that, we ask the tubes to be replaced every 2 years. Now, those are swappable within the space, so all you got to do is pull it out, replace the tubes. The unit itself actually will continue to work. But other than that, I'm trying to think if there's any other maintenance to be considered. That's all that I can, really foresee.
Okay, great. Thank you for that answer. And here's another question. You showed wall-mounted UV disinfectant instruments. Are there smaller versions of these, maybe handheld ones, for example?
Absolutely. So I will go back a few slides and I can actually show potentially one of those units for UV lighting. Hang on one second here. Right here. So what you're looking at right there is a handheld UVC, and that's used for desks, for keyboards, for laptops, different things like that. Those are definitely available right now. Those are very effective. Again, you're treating the space, you're treating the surfaces versus treating the people. So that's definitely a way you can do it. And then again, to reiterate, how do we know if that's working or not? You use the dosimeter cards, and you basically place this card next to or inside of the space that you're going to want to disinfect, and that dosage indicator will change colors and show you that you applied, enough time, number one, and then number two, your lamps are strong enough to be able to kill any bacteria. So great question, and yes, absolutely, those are available.
Yeah, and to add to that, that's where we've seen the complementary approach where people will use the BPI to clean the air, but then for conference rooms or offices, they'll use a handheld solution to go in and disinfect those, I don't want to say multi-tenant, but multi-user spaces where there's going to be a lot of people in the room, touching the tables, touching the chairs, all that stuff.
Yeah, and to reiterate too, that's these two technologies, they might sound like they may compete against one another, but I think at the end of the day, these two technologies are complementary, and they should be used complementary. They're two of the important pieces of the puzzle to getting back to work.
Sorry, I was speaking on mute. Okay, I'm back. Is there an ideal space for BPI to be used? For example, a warehouse, office, retail, store, somebody's home?
Anywhere where there are people occupying the space. I mean, we've seen it everywhere. That's why we threw in those last couple slides, just to give you guys a large understanding of, we've seen it in rooms as large as casino floors, high ceilings, highly populated. We've seen it for, we have people evaluating it for residents, for colleges. Anywhere where people are occupying the space is the application for bipolar ionization.
Okay, that's all I have for questions here. Unless you guys have anything you want to say, I guess we can wrap it up.
No, that's it. Thank you, everybody, again. You can reach us by reaching out to GCP or by, a couple emails here, LinkedIn, our website, anything like that. But thanks again, GCP folks, too. Thank you so much for putting this on.
No problem. And thank you to Zach and Dean for sharing so much great information and insight with us today. And thanks to all of you for participating in today's webinar. We hope you found this webinar. Go ahead, sorry.
I'm sorry. One more note. I just wanted to make it clear. If you look for us, we are in the middle of a rebranding, so you might not see what you're seeing on this screen. This is brand new. You guys are getting a fresh look at it. So if you go on our website, don't be deterred by seeing something a little bit different. If it's Donwell, it's us, and you can always reach out to us via email directly as well. Sorry, Pamela.
Perfect. No, that's great. Please jump in whenever you think of it. And for the audience, we hope you found this webinar engaging and informative. And if you have thoughts you'd like to share with us on the topic, please let us know. And for upcoming information about webinars we have coming, please visit www.gcpartnership.com/events, or you can find the information at www.cose.org. That's COSE.org. And this concludes today's session. Thanks again.